I don't think that there's any American novel or English novel or Japanese novel, that promotes Nigerian culture or promotes African culture. So it is our right and it is our duty, it is our responsibility. That's what I've learned from perhaps one of the greatest writers from Africa, Ayi Kwei Armah. Hello again and welcome to Dul Johnson's Creative Talks. Tonight I will be talking to you about yet another book, and this is a book by a very, very accomplished and popular, and I think perhaps one of the greatest writers from Africa, Ayi Kwei Armah. I would love to have introduced you to all of his books that I have read, but because we have agreed I'm going to talk to you about just one of them, I'll be talking to you about 2,000 Seasons. And there is a reason why I chose 2,000 Seasons. You see, I talked about themes in the introductory part of the video, and I said that's where the real message of a book resides, and the characters carry that through the story. In 2,000 Seasons, Armah replays for us or teaches, I don't know which is the best word to use, but I think I can use the word teach also, that Armah teaches us a great lesson about Africa and African history. So it takes us through a lesson in African history and teaches us a lesson about Africa. 2,000 Seasons is about Africa's experience with the two kinds of colonialism that we have experienced, that we have gone through. But he's not just telling us stories about, our colonial experience. He is making us to understand why we went through that kind of experience and why we will continue to go through it if we do not change. That's why that message is still very important to me up till today. So as a reader, I would want every African child to read that novel. It's a novel that's published a very long time, I think in the 60s, probably early 60s, right? But I'm assuring you that that lesson is still very, very useful to Africans. He takes you, there's a narrator that takes us through the story. And he starts by, he calls the original African way of life, he calls it the way. And that way is a creative way, it's a dynamic way, it's a moving movement, Hello viewer, a couple of times on my video, I have mentioned my forthcoming textbook on creative writing. The book is now available and you can order if you are in Nigeria or somewhere around Nigeria. You can order by calling any of the numbers below. And if you're outside Nigeria, you can get it on Amazon through the links. Thank you. Anything that is progressive has to have a gem of creativity. So the way that Africa and Africans had from the beginning was a way, a living way, a creative way, a way of life that was meant to carry us forward as a people. Back in history, we are told that we gave life to the rest of the world. So think about that. Now, the society in which he sets the novel is the West African society. And the first encroachment by the group that he calls predators, bringers of death, zombies. There are so many, names or metaphors that he uses to call those people are from the Arabs. They were the first to invade Africa, and they came with their ways which were very destructive. They were greedy, lustrous people, all kinds of evil that you can think of ways of living. And when they came, of course, because some of Africa's leaders were themselves greedy, they fell, into the hands they fell for the deceit that these predators, brought. And so with time, they were getting destroyed by the new ways and the wars that they engaged in, and the kind of destructions that took place. And they were forced gradually, those who had to move, those who survived and had to move, and they moved all the way down to the coast, right? So we are now talking about places where we now find Nigeria, Benin Republic, Togo, and Ghana. Of course, Ghana is where Ayi Kwei Armah comes from. I've mentioned that. So, the second set of predators, let's call them so, also destroyers, he calls them so, bringers of another form of death, who came. That's the Europeans, with their own kind of deceit. And of course, the taking away of slaves, and then later the coming of colonialism, as an occupation. And of course, that continues today, even as in a mental form of slavery. So Armah's message in that book is simply that if we had kept to our ways, if we had resisted these evil ways that were brought to us, the deceit that was sold to us, and if we had kept to ourselves, to our way, if we had resisted, if we had fought collectively, we wouldn't be where we are today. And it is a fact. Africa is beggared. Africa has been destroyed. Africa is still being destroyed. That book has imprinted that message on my mind from the day I finished reading that book. And it still lives with me. And of course, what it does for me is that it makes me to think Africa all the time. It makes me to think about progress. 2000 Seasons has remained the book in my head. It lives in me, and I think I live the preaching. No, the word is not preaching. I live the teachings and the lessons that I have learned from that book. And that's what I always try to transmit to my students of creative writing as well. That we must write Africa. As a Nigerian student, write Nigeria, and then open up, write Africa. As an African, whichever country you come from, first write that country, and let's expand the image of our country to Africa. I'm not saying we should limit our audience to our own communities, but of course, yes, we must first and foremost promote ourselves, promote our cultures, promote our ways of life. I don't think that there is any American novel or English novel or Japanese novel, that promotes Nigerian culture or promotes African culture. So it is our right, and it is our duty, it is our responsibility. And that's what I've learned from 2000 Seasons. And I would like you, as my listener, please, if you are going to read books for the purpose of learning and impacting your life, let that be one of the books. And let the books I treat in this brief series be part of your recipe for reading. Thank you.